The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find. The Big H Podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style.
Gregg Sadwick, class of 1984 from Hilton Central School District. It's great having you on the Big H Podcast.
Thanks, Mike. It's great being here. This is our 40-year reunion.
Is it really?
Yeah, back in October, this is October. A couple weeks ago, we had our 40-year reunion.
I bet they had a lot of questions for you, huh?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people there are people you see anyways.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of them I've run into throughout the summer. And the out-of-towners have been communicating with me.
Uh-huh.
But it was good seeing people.
Where was it held at? I mean, it 1 or 2 or 3 day thing?
Braddock's Bay. And it was Apple Fest weekend.
Okay.
Yeah, Braddock's Bay.
Now, you've been doing a lot since high school in those 40 years, right?
It's been a long 40 years. Quick, but long.
Quick but long. And presently your most toughest adventure is running for Congress. What made you decide to throw your hat in the political ring?
I think we are on the wrong track.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny. Before I came here, I had a couple extra minutes, so I popped by the mall real quick. And those memories of the 80s, the mall were coming back and how America was pretty freaking incredible when you and I were young.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And the America we inherited from our grandparents, the greatest generation, is not the same America we've been handing our grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tragic.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you see something wrong and you want to correct it, what are some of the ideas or things that have happened in the past 40 years that might have led up to some of those changes for the worse?
Yeah, I think I'm obviously on the conservative side. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm running on the Republican line, and I think Republicans are really good people. We just want to go to work, do our jobs, take care of families, get good education for our kids, and we're involved in the community.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not really paying attention to what's going on, and we're trusting our politicians are doing their job. The problem is the activists. I'm going to say on the progressive end of the spectrum, have been winning these little battles over a number of years. So think about this: 15 years ago, if you or I would have walked into a girls' locker room at the YMCA, we'd be hauled off in handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is, 15 years later. Not only is that acceptable, but it's even celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't happen overnight. It happened with just little incremental wins. They're playing the long game, and while we're out just trying to do what we do, we've been caught off guard.
Now, do you believe that it's more of a fiscal issue, or is it more of a social issue at this point, or is it just a combination of
It's
both?
a combination. So with the fiscal aspect of it, this is one of the things I've learned running. Everyone asks me, well, what are you going to do for me? We've lost that. JFK was a Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think he'd be a Democrat today. But his comment was, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
Mm-hmm.
That whole aspect's been lost. It's all about, what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? I've thought about this a lot. It's almost like a pyramid scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So, a number of years ago, our politicians gave away something. And then the next election, not only do you have to give away that something, but now you got to, give away the next something.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next something. And now we're at a point where we can't give away much more. I mean, look at where our national debt is. It's
Mm-hmm.
In 1980, when you and I were younger, the national debt was 25% of GDP, the national output. Today, it's over 100%. That's just not sustainable. And the problem with it is it's not slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
It's continuing to escalate. And that's, I always say you can't cheat math. Okay. I'm sorry, Mike, what subject are you?
I teach them all. I'm
You teach them
third
all?
grade, so I
Okay.
got them all.
All right. So you're a math guy too then. You can't cheat math. At the end of the day, the math's going to work itself out whether we cooperate or not. And that's going to be a day of reckoning.
Did you always find yourself to be of the conservative mindset?
Yeah, I remember I had Mr. Pete Van Horn for
Yes.
English my 12th grade year, and he was awesome. And he was a Democrat, but he wasn't. I think today people are more apt to share their opinions and hold it against you, and that was not Mr. Van Horn. So for our senior project, we had to write a paper, and we had to present them 5 a day, but the fifth one would be debated, and that for the whole week. So I volunteered to have mine be debated, and I did my paper. And I remember standing behind the podium, and I got my little bag of tricks. I put my little campaign hat on. One hand pops up with a flag, another hand pops up with a flag, and I then stand up with my hat on. And I was defending Reaganomics. So I've always been of a conservative nature. And I remember my first election was able to pull that lever for Ronald Reagan. That was pretty awesome.
Truth be told, full disclosure, we're both Hilton Central School District graduates. Greg, you were I was a freshman when you were a senior, and you were a pretty popular dude, and you had leadership qualities even back then. What are some of the things that you remember that you did? Maybe sometimes people don't like to go so far back in high school, but that high school reunion you had, were there things that you knew about yourself way back when that said, I want to be a leader in some realm?
Not know if it was wanting to be. It's just bubbled. And a lot of people say they want to do something, but very few people bend over and pick up that baton. So that's actually what happened with this congressional run. Laurent Singletary ran 2 years ago, and he was a phenomenal candidate, and he lost, unfortunately. But this go around, the baton was laying there on the floor, and no one picked it up. And you can't have democracy unless you have choices. So I offered a choice.
Did someone come to you, or did you just see the baton and pick it up on your own?
When I got involved with Laurent's campaign, that's when I kind of got into the inner circle. So it was one night at a fundraiser for Josh Jensen, who's also a Hilton grad. It was at Josh Jensen's fundraiser where the conversation started happening.
We did have Josh on earlier in the year, Jargon with Josh. That's what his podcast was titled. And it also, I read up on you that you became heavily involved in the Grease Rotary service.
Yeah, so I've been in Grease Rotary. So I was actually in Hilton. My first foray into politics, I lived in Hilton when I started my family. And I was on the zoning board, the planning board, and it was time to get on the town board. And this is where politics is horrible. The county legislator at the time came to me and said, Greg, it's not your turn to run. The highway supervisor's retiring. He needs an income. You need to take a break. And Rick Lemke, the Maverick, town supervisor, like, Greg, screw them. You're going to come with me.
Yeah.
We're going to run. And I made the wrong choice then. I sided with the party, the lesson that I learned not to do ever again. And I sat that one out. Well, 2 years later, they come back to me. Hey, Greg, it's your turn now. I said, well, you guys missed your opportunity. My wife and I decided to move to Greece. And then at that point, the boys were starting to get into school, and I shifted over to Rotary. That's when I got involved in Rotary.
And what does the Rotary Club do?
So it's a civic organization. It's non-political. It's non-religious. It's a bunch of people just trying to do good work. So our pet charities usually are centered around kids, disabled kids, and just trying to help out and keep our money local in the community to help out.
Name some of the initiatives or the services you did for the kids. I mean, that was in general charity.
So I was the president 2 years ago. So when I was president, it was pretty tough. It was coming out of COVID. So it was a tough time to be president. But our biggest initiative was Greece Community Cares. And it's, at the time we started this, it was 3 years ago. When we got involved, there were about 100 homeless children in Greece. And by the time we got the program up and running, there was like double that, just shy of double that. It was shocking. It was shocking, the homelessness that, we live in our nice, neighborhoods, our houses. We don't get touched by that until you get involved and you see, oh my goodness, that's remarkable. So it was help. We couldn't save all of these kids, but it was trying to prevent people from getting into that status. If they're a payment away from, if they can't make their down payment on rent, so to speak, but they can make their monthly payments. Okay, well, we'd help out with that down payment. And it was all ran by the Grease schools. It was between us. Bob Johnson was a sponsor. ESL was a sponsor, and the Grease Rotary. We've also done some stuff overseas. We've built schools. We've helped to build schools in a lot of African countries. Water wells is a big one in African countries.
Going back to your St. John Fisher days, you are a member, or thank you for your service, first of all, in the Navy.
Thank you.
What, when did you decide that you wanted to pursue that line of work?
Well, when I saw the white uniform,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's pretty cool. But my father was in the Navy.
Okay.
And he was an enlisted guy. So we had always heard about the stories. And then my older brother, he got into ROTC. So I followed that path, and it was remarkable. So in ROTC, you go to college and they pay for your education, and then coming out of getting your degree, then you got to serve your 4 years active as an officer. And it was a wonderful experience.
What were your, what did your highest rank that you achieved?
So lieutenant. So if I'd stayed in, I would have been something called frocking. Okay. So they give you your rate, the next rate, as they know you're about to get out. So I made 03, but to technically be 03, a lieutenant, I had to re-sign up.
Mm-hmm.
So I got as a lieutenant junior grade.
Okay. And in those 4 years, where did you serve around the world?
So let me share with you, when I was in college, during the summers, you had to do your 1 month cruise. And back in 1986, you had to be a junior, maybe going into your senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And that year there was an unknown movie that came out that really no one ever saw. It was called Top Gun. And during that summer, I actually got to go to Miramar, and they sent us up in F-14s having joyrides. That was pretty remarkable. But that was neat. But in addition to that, when I was on my actual ship, I did a Mediterranean cruise, visiting Spain, Italy, France, Israel. I did a South American cruise where we went through the Panama Canal. We worked with every Navy on the Pacific coast. Mm-hmm. You'd work with them, then you go into port, they'd wine and dine you, move on to the next country, work with them, go into port, wine and dine. Then we came up the Atlantic. And then on the way home, we stopped in Cuba. My brother Tim was a year older than me. Him and my uncle flew down to Cuba and Puerto Rico, and got to ride the ship back to Newport, Rhode Island for 5 days. So that's pretty fun with them.
What type of ship was it?
It was a Knox class frigate. So it had 400 men on it. It was a destroyer escort. So we were submarine hunters. Yeah, so even though I was an engineering officer, one of my collateral duties was being a submarine evaluator, anti-submarine warfare evaluator. And the science behind submarine warfare, you're dealing in 3D, and they're not pinging, right? So you're just listening.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I'm hearing a noise over here, is it here, 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 here? And then you have what's called the thermocline.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what, 100 feet, 200 feet depth. The temperature change is actually a hard temperature change. So you don't know if you're going through that thermocline with a steep angle change. It was quite a science. That was pretty fascinating.
Were you always a science guy in high school and college? Like, did you enjoy that type of subject?
I did, till I took engineering for my first year in college. And Hilton had some great science teachers. I mean, Mr. Evans was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Dowd was phenomenal. Mr. Herzog in physics, I love that class.
Yeah. So Dad was in the Navy, your brother Tim, and then there was you.
Steve, the oldest brother.
Steve, I'm sorry. Yeah. So then you served your 4 years.
Yeah, and I'll say, while I was in college, by the way, I actually was coaching high school at Hilton. So
wrestling or football?
Both. So in 86, my sophomore year, so I guess it would have been your junior year. Did the math right? I was coaching the JV team with Bud Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck Partridge had gotten laid off from teaching, so he went to Lindenville, and I stepped in to be the JV coach that year. And then in 87, Chuck came back, so I went down to modified, and I was on modified the next 2 years before I had to go serve. So I was in college, I was doing that, which is pretty cool, because when Rick was winning his 2 state championships, I was actually able to be in his corner in the state finals, which is pretty tough because my father had passed away during that time. So Rick, here I am, a couple years older than Rick, and I'm stepping as a father figure because now I'm having parent-teacher conferences at school because I happen to be there anyways. And my mother just had a stroke, so she wasn't able to do that. So it was those were interesting years.
And I'm going to follow up later on in the podcast about those tough times and how you helped Rick and get through those. I forgot that you were a coach. How did your coaching with football and wrestling help you in your Navy service and your times in the Rotary and now with you running for public office?
It's about responsibility. It was kind of weird. So I was 19 and then I lost. So I was able to drink. 19 was drinking age and I lost it because they raised it to 21. So I'm not able to even go into a bar, but I'm able to be on a bus with 30 sophomore, freshman wrestlers and the cheerleaders, which that was nuts. There's one particular one. I'll tell you about her off camera.
Yeah.
But so I'm able to have that responsibility, but I can't even go into a bar, which is kind of odd. But that teaches responsibility pretty quick. You're responsible for other people. I also had to deal with parents because I had one mother who I love. I love this woman. I'm not going to mention her name. She was a phenomenal parent. I love her. But she would come to me and say, well, what? How come she was talking about the lineup and questioning why her son and Rick would sometimes switch off. And sometimes kids didn't play sports either, or they didn't get starting positions. So I deal with parents in that regard too. So it was, 19, 20 years old. You're learning pretty quick how to deal with people.
It is quite young. You grow up fast.
You coach too. I mean, the challenge of that.
Yeah. When I started, I was 30 years old. So I 11-year difference from when you started coaching till now. And it's you're dealing with the athlete and then communicating with parents as well. So, then talk a little bit about your businesses that you started or took over.
So in 2016, I had the opportunity to get involved with two businesses. One was I was looking at a franchise, Mako Automotive, and one was a company called Solid Surfaces, which was a granite and quartz countertop company. So I hooked up with a private equity group to purchase the countertop company. And I'm thinking one of these two businesses is going to make it across the finish line, and they both do. So I'm like, now what do I do? I don't know what to do now. And my young son, who's 23 at the time, says, Dad, let me take the collision shop. And we took a gamble on that, and he's been doing a phenomenal job with the collision shop. The countertop company, the private equity group that I got involved with, bought 6 companies. We were one of 6. I was now the president of the Rochester division. So we had a regional presence on the East Coast, and that lasted about 2 years. And it went belly up. My division was the only division that was making money. Then up claiming bankruptcy Christmas Eve 2019, which is a couple months right before COVID. So we go into bankruptcy. I keep my division alive, and I had to do some things that weren't textbook, but they kept the division alive, and I was able to buy it out of bankruptcy. We didn't skip a beat. And I remember Monday, the money transfers for the company, and Friday, Governor Cuomo shuts us all down for COVID. So it was it's been quite a ordeal there. But today we're doing good. We're back to where we should be.
So which son is running the collision shop?
Zach is my oldest son. Zach's running it.
And your youngest son is named?
Jake. Jake's a Hilton grad also. Zach went to Aquinas. Jake went to Hilton.
Are they married at this point and local? Obviously they are, right?
Zach is married. He gave me the first grandchild 4 months ago.
Congrats.
Dylan, little girl, beautiful. And Jake is engaged to a wonderful girl as well. And next year is their wedding.
Very good. What's it like being a grandpa now?
It's been a little challenging because I'm campaigning every day. Every day I'm on the campaign trail. So it's hard to meet up with them. But when I do, and I'll be honest, I can't, 0 to 6 months, I struggle with babies because it's just not, I need some interaction.
Right.
At 4 months, she's starting to get to that point where she's having some personality and she'll smile. So now this is a little more my playing field, if you will. So I'm good now.
I did see a picture of you holding a baby. Is that her?
Yeah, we did some commercials that have aired on TV, and it shows me and the two girls, the fiance and my son's wife, and the babies in the middle. Yeah, we have one coming out Monday, tomorrow. The new one. This one, it's panned out a little more, so now my two boys will be in it too. They won't be cut out like last time.
What did you learn from being a business owner about your connections with people, your relations with people, and the responsibility, as you talked about earlier, to people's livelihoods?
Yeah, I think what I learned is you have to set the example. I'll give you an example. We had at the end of summer, labor's been brutal the last
Mhm.
couple of years, particularly since COVID. Finding labor's been brutal. We had an issue this summer where paid family leave, which is tough for small business to deal with. We had people on paid family leave, summer vacations at the end, and then people calling in. My night shift was decimated, but we still got to ship product.
Mm-hmm.
So who's back there helping out with the CNCs till 4 a.m? I am. That's what you do with small business.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not doing that, how can I expect anyone else to
Mm-hmm.
jump in and do it? And then the next morning, I'm back there at 8 o'clock. And then that night, I'm there till midnight again. And setting the example and showing the team we're all in this together. That's probably the biggest thing any young leader or business owner can be doing.
What's CNC stand for?
Well, you got to ask me that. Computer
Customers?
No,
Oh,
it's,
no.
it's computer. It's like milling equipment, but
Okay.
it's computer driven. And
So
I don't know how to use that, by the way. So I'm doing the grunt work.
What are you faking it?
No, I got
Doing the packaging?
the guys I'm with. They're pushing the buttons and programming. I'm doing the grunt work. Pulling the slabs off the table. Resetting up the pods. I mean, the lasers come down and show you where to put the pods. I can do that. I can follow that. Hosing down the tables. I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just being that guy to keep things moving while they're doing the technical stuff.
One of your platforms, and I've also always heard this in politics, is small business is the heartbeat of America.
85% of our economy is based on small business, which is kind of unfortunate because the big business gets the attention. I think during my debate with my opponent, I believe I said this, that he brought money in for Li-Cycle, which is to take lithium batteries, these EVs, and recycle them. And it's good to have, but we got over $300 million in government assistance for that. It was going to employ 300 people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, geez, if my two companies of 100 people, that means I'd get an equivalent of $100 million to grow my business.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't focus on small business. We focus on the big wins because that gets the headlines. And then when it falls apart, like Li-Cycle's doing right now, where's the politicians, taking the responsibility for that? Not around.
When did you move to Penfield?
A couple months ago.
A couple of months ago?
Yeah, I've been in Hilton School District pretty much all my life, and now I'm on the east side, and it's an incredible place. We're looking around at Quite Bay. I'm on the top floor of it's called the Bellagio.
Mm-hmm.
I had my boat, my two jet skis out there because it's right above South Point Marina, and my boat got zero usage this summer because every day I'm on there campaigning, the boat got no use.
What's it like when you're campaigning against an opponent and you want to stay above the fray? You want to keep it civil?
I think he and I have both done that. And I did a Rochester Rotary debate with my opponent. And one of the things I said in my opening line was, I have no animus towards him. I just think it's time for a change. I don't agree with Joe Morelli's policies, but I'm sure he's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, if he and I went out for a beer, he'd be just like going out with anyone else for a beer. So I'll be frank, I've had a couple people come to me saying, hey, we got this story. This is what you got to nail him with. He did this. Hey, this is a story guy. We got to nail him with this. And a lot of stories, I'm like, wait a minute, that was like 4 years ago. If it didn't bring him down then, if I'm just rehashing that just looks petty.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a couple times where people can't. There's one time, secret call. This guy calls me up and he comes in. We're kind of meeting under round table, dark lamp, dimly lit bulb. He's okay. Here's what we got to do. We got to blah, blah, blah. It's like, dude, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on.
You're not into gotcha politics.
Yeah, and you know what? If there's really something to that, why don't you guys find that? Mm-hmm. I got to run a campaign. I got to go meet people. If that's really there, Someone else has to find that.
When you decided to run, was it a family decision? Did people come to you and say, rah, 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 or no, no, no?
So one of my boys was, you know what, Dad, you've been immersed in political knowledge all your life.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. You don't want to look back and say, I should have. Go for it. My other son he's a little more naysayer. It's like, oh, why are you going to do that? Blah, blah, blah. No one can beat Morelli. And I said, you know what? 250 years ago, if that was the attitude, we'd still be subjects of Great Britain. And to his credit, like a week later, he came back and said, I've been thinking about that. You should do that. So both of them have been big supporters ever since. And my brother, Tim, has been an incredible supporter. Rick, I love Rick. Rick is, Rick, I asked Rick to help with a couple things, and he's like, because of my job, I probably shouldn't. I can't be associated with it. And to me, that's the reason why you have to.
Mm-hmm.
If you're feeling bullied that you can't say anything, that's un-American. We need to stop that now before it gets even worse. And that's my concern with where we are right now. I think some people are afraid to speak. It's kind of interesting is the Republicans are called the fascists, but yet we're the ones that are bullied into silence. Mm-hmm. You guys are the ones that are able to say whatever you want, but if we say something, we're bullied into silence. And that's not how America should be. It should be free speech.
How do you change that if you were to win?
Well, it's making sure we get people out of influence that have different ideas. For instance, John Kerry and Hillary Clinton both said it would be easier to combat disinformation if the First Amendment didn't get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like unbelievable. And then you have that side cheering. Yeah, they're right. It's like, you guys know, there's something called the Tytler cycle. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Go ahead. Educate me.
Okay. So think of a clock. And at the top of the clock, that first generation breaks out of bondage, whether it's slavery, whether it's government bondage, whatever it may be. They break out and they start to experience freedoms. So the next generation experience freedoms and liberties and life's good. The next generation, they're taking it even further and things are getting better. But then at some point, apathy starts to set in. And before you know it, complacency sets in. And people forgot what was sacrificed and why the sacrifices were. Well, I'll use free speech as an example. People understand why we have blanket free speech. People forgot why we have the Second Amendment, because what we have today is a lot different than what we had at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock. But the clock is continuing. And before you know it, people start handing all their freedoms and liberties back to the government at 11 o'clock. And before you know it, you're back in bondage. And we saw it during COVID. We handed back all of our freedoms and liberties because we were so scared of COVID and we're not smart enough to know what to do. So we want the dishonest people in government to get us through this. And we handed our liberties over and the government didn't give them all back yet. So we were literally at 11 o'clock ready to put us back into bondage. And history repeats itself.
How do you know who to trust?
That's a good question. Critical thinking on your own. I mean, I watch Fox News, but I was also going to steady diet of the other side because I wanted to see what they're saying. And sometimes the other side has good points. I do lean right, so I think Fox News has better points. But let me give you a different example. My brother Steve, my oldest brother. Okay. Steve and I are ideologically opposed, but I do know one thing about my brother Steve. He's a smart guy. So my brother Steve thinks a certain way about a particular point, and I think, what, are you crazy? What, are you dumb? No, I know he's not dumb. So there's got to be some merit to what he's thinking. And that's where I think America's lost it. You got half of America looking at the one half saying, you guys are idiots. You want that Donald Trump? He's a fascist. He's a traitor. Mm-hmm. And you got the other half looking at Kamala saying, you guys dumb. She's a socialist. And we got to stop that and get back to understanding, okay, why do they feel that way? And how do we close that gap? Both sides are responsible for that.
With politics being local, I've heard that politics is all local. How do you see our local? Same thing?
I see our local politics. Yeah, I do. But I see our local politics right now is going to a one-party system. You used to have the balance. The Monroe County, the suburbs were red and the city was blue. Mm-hmm. Blue is eking its way out in the suburbs, mm-hmm. and a lot of the, particularly east side suburbs, have flipped. So we're getting a one-party system. So you think about what's going on in the city right now with the CRC, the Community Resource Collaborative, I think it was called, where $1 million was lost to this COVID money, and it was given. The people that were involved were all these nonprofits that are attached to the one party in the city. There's no accountability. There's zero accountability because there's one party. And where have we seen one party systems that have worked? Nowhere. But we know there's one party in China. That's kind of scary. We know there's one party in Russia. That's kind of scary. But I don't think people see that. I kind of look at it as a symbiotic relationship where you need a mother and a father. Not that you can't have a mother-only family or a father-only family, but textbook. Ideally, if you're starting out, that's what you want to get to, is a two-parent system where you have a masculine influence and a feminine influence to help nurture the child. And I see right now the one-party system, we are losing that similar, scenario.
What if you run into, I'm a teacher and I run into students that they might be being raised by a single parent? What advice or what policy do you think we should follow up with them so you both have that textbook idea?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because I believe it's up to the parents to raise their kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's not up to the government to get involved with that. But I think where the schools have to help is the schools can't be all left. Okay, the schools have got to get back to, as I mentioned, Mr. Van Horn. Pete, I knew he was a Democrat, but he didn't try to influence me.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me a 98 on that paper. He didn't punish me
Mm-hmm.
because how dare I have those philosophies?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the schools right now are not doing that. I'll give you an example. I had a French exchange student stay with us through the Rotary program. And one of the things in her French class that the teacher asked was, because this is French, so they can ask questions, right? It was, why is Donald Trump a poor choice for president? Answer this in French. It's like, that's so pathetic that we allow our teachers to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You probably saw the one in Penfield where the guy had Republican, and then I think he had 3 derogatory words under it. You saw that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how is that being tolerated? So the schools have got to get back to calling balls, not even calling balls and strikes. You don't have an influence over the kids' ideology. You need to teach kids critical thinking. You need to teach kids STEM, DEI, gender studies. Those new things that we didn't have years ago have no place in today's education. Or I shouldn't say that. They may have a place, but they shouldn't be the dominating topics. The core curriculum should be the dominating topics.
You're talking to a teacher, so I'm trying to structure my next question. But one of the words I did write down was critical thinking, and that is something that I think education, we always have to think of critical thinking and not tell kids what to think, because they are very impressionable, and especially you're dealing with seniors in high school that are voting age and type of things like that. The DEI is tough. We know that this is your podcast. It's not mine. The STEM, can you explain a little bit what that stands for?
So it's STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So the skills are going to help you actually get a job and add value to society. If we're not teaching our kids those skills, we're not advancing. And the problem is we know our adversaries are, and we know China is. We know all the other countries are doing this, and we are, again, going back to that Tyler cycle, we are at 10, 11 o'clock, and we're taking everything for granted we have today, not realizing that it was all built upon people that took STEM seriously, people that took our liberties seriously, our freedom seriously, knew where they came from. I'll give you an example. This came out of my debate with, I debated Congressman Morelli this week in front of Brighton High School. So I went into the lion's den.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the comments I made, the question about the Second Amendment came up. Why do we have the Second Amendment? We got, kids today might think, well, so we can carry our guns and, protect ourselves and blah, blah, blah. It really was put in place because when, we're at 12 o'clock, right, in the Tyler cycle, we had just broken off from a tyrannical government. And we wanted to make sure that the tyrannical government never had the ability to steal the liberties from its citizenry. So the Second Amendment was put in place for that very reason. And today we can't appreciate that because we think our government would never turn on us. Yeah, watch the news.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because when the Democrats say, or the progressives, I try to draw a distinction between Democrats and progressives. I think Democrats are much closer in ideology than us. When the progressives say Donald Trump's a fascist, if he gets in office, he'll never turn over the power. Well, then you should be the one shouting the loudest that we need the Second Amendment,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the whole purpose of it. So I think we've lost sight of some of those key fundamentals of why we have the rights we have.
I want to go through some of the ideas and concepts on your platform. Inflation. Talk about that a little bit.
So basic economics, right? When you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. So during COVID, they shut us down. They shut us down. The supply chains were ravaged. So we're not producing as many goods as we once did. So the supply of goods goes down. In addition, they push all this free money into the society. So now people have more money and demand goes up. That is the classic textbook definition of inflation. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. And it was intentional. They did, Kamala Harris was the deciding vote on two bills that pumped in $3.2 trillion. One was the Second American Rescue Plan, and one was the Inflation Creation Act that they call the Inflation Reduction Act, that President Biden actually, said the unspoken part 2 months ago, calling it the Green New Deal. Okay, they knew what they were doing. But we pumped that money in, and I'll go back to the first one, the American Rescue Plan. At the time, I'm a business guy, and we need people back to work. Okay, we've lived with COVID a year. We know what we got to be doing. Okay, let's get back to work and make this happen. But instead, nope, they disincentivize people to go back to work. They shove more money in, and that's why we have inflation. But the bigger concern with me, other than inflation, is the debt. So right now, the debt is $36 trillion. That's insane. Okay, and the problem is not slowing down. Okay, no one's throwing and red flares or sirens are not going off saying, "Hey, warning, warning." We're just keep spending. And Donald Trump, I love his plans about no tax on tips, no tax on car interest, no tax on overtime, and I think that's great. But if we don't address spending, that's not good. We got to address both sides of that equation, or we're just going to keep adding to that debt. Think about this. We borrow money from our adversaries to give to other people overseas, and we're left with a debt. We're not the America in the 1980s where we were flush with cash. The world dynamics have changed. We can't be spending like we once did. We need to make sure that our house is in order. Something's called BRICS. I don't know if you're familiar with BRICS. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China. And I think they've added like 30 more countries to it that are trying to replace the US dollar as the world's currency. That should scare the heck out of all of us. If we lose the US dollar as the world's currency, that changes a lot of things in America. But we're not taking that seriously. It was last week, 36 nations met to figure out how to replace the dollar as the world's currency. That would be catastrophic. No one's talking about it.
Some of the people that I listen to say, well, we only talk about the debt every 4 years. Do you think some of the other social issues cloud our judgment and how we talk about it, that we should be talking more about it, but we might slide into talking about other social problems?
No, I don't think that's the reason why. I think it's because out of sight, out of mind. Out of sight, out of mind. Things are going fine, and it's not impacting me. But it's like running your car without changing your oil. You'll get by year 4 at 10,000 miles. You'll get by year 8 at 16,000. But eventually, it's going to catch up to you. And I think we're just taking that for granted.
Women are the heaviest voting bloc of the two genders, and you're for equal rights and reproductive rights. Go into a little bit of that for me.
So I do believe that women should have the right to choose. They should. It's their body. It should be their choice. But I'm also not for late-term abortion. So that's where my point. A mailer just hit a couple days ago that we sent out. 50,000 pieces went out in the mail, and it was the who really cares about women's rights, Joe or Greg? They both agree women should have the right to choose. Yes. They both would not sign a national abortion ban. Yes. That's where the similarities end, and then it goes into 4 differences. And one difference is for late-term abortion. He is, I'm not. Title IX, women's rights in sports, keeping that playing field level. He's not for it. I am. When I say he's not for it, his legislation is not. He's voted against legislation that try to keep men out of women's sports. Then this is a good one. The Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act. He voted no on. How could you possibly vote no on that?
Mhm.
That if an illegal alien commits a crime against a woman, a sex crime, that they should immediately be deported.
The legislation says they're okay to stay in the country.
The legislation says they need to be deported. He voted no.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we're talking about women's rights, let's talk about women's rights. But all they talk about is abortion, abortion, abortion,
Mhm.
abortion. During my televised debate this week, one of the things I brought up was they've had the House, they've had the Senate, and they've had the presidency all at one time. If they really were serious about that, why don't they pass a law? Why don't they pass a law protecting reproductive rights, as they call it, which is actually ironic. It's reproductive rights so they can have abortions. That's
Mhm.
not reproductive. That's contradicting.
Mhm.
But anyways, when they have all three, why don't they pass laws to protect their abortion revenue stream? But they don't, because they know it's an election issue that they can just use to drive a wedge. So they're actually doing women a disservice. They're just playing games with them and with everyone else.
When you're knocking on doors and you're campaigning, what type of feedback do you get from women on that?
Variety.
Mm-hmm.
Most, I'll give an example of my, it's very emotional. I'll give an
Mhm.
example of one of my son's fiance's friends. Her and I agree, women should have the right to choose. But then she says that women should have the rights to cross all 9 months, but there shouldn't be late term abortion and there shouldn't be partial birth abortion. It's like, wait a minute, though, you just said, and they get caught in this circuit. It's an emotional issue.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in discussion with I just met these people 6 months ago, not very good friends of mine. But the woman, women should have all 9 months. And she respected my opinion. She's a voter for me. But her husband then chimed in and he's like arguing with her about it. And the two of them are going back and forth arguing. I'm, backing off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wow, if a married couple struggle, I mean, it just shows you how volatile an issue is. So it's across the board. But most people seem to be in agreement with me that, yeah, we got to protect women's right to choose. But the third trimester should be off the table unless there's, medical complications and such.
Do you consider or talk about a particular time period that, I know DeSantis, when he was in Florida, he got in trouble for trying to push a 6-week ban or anything.
So I've met with, there's a federation called the, what are they called? Feminists for Pro-Life, which is actually a bunch of Democrats, but that's the organization, Feminists for Pro-Life. And they were initially upset with me. And I met with their CEO and their executive director. We had a great session together and they understood, when you're able to talk to people, say, here's the deal. If you want someone that's all pro-life, I'm not your candidate. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste my money. Go find someone else that's going to lose. If we're going to have any shot in Monroe County, we need to meet America where America's at, meet Monroe County where it's at. Or we're just going to keep losing. Mm-hmm. Would you rather have a 3-month win? 6-month win with me or a 9-month loss with him? Mm-hmm. I mean, those are your two choices. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to people rationally about it, so that those two people, they actually, you know what, we're going to back you, but here's some things we want to hear you say. It's about education. Mm-hmm. So right now there's only Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood's main job is abortion. That's the revenue stream. Mm-hmm. Okay, but there's other options that there are out there, such as Compass Care right here in Rochester, that can coach women on what are your options if you decide to keep the child. Okay, what are the resources? And by the way, if you want to have an abortion, that's fine too. But what are the other things available? Planned Parenthood doesn't do that. The other thing about Planned Parenthood, you also hear that it's between a woman and her doctor. You ever heard that?
Oh, many times.
Planned Parenthood's not a woman's doctor. Mm-hmm. It's for lack of a better person, it's a salesperson. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're trying to push people down that path. So that's disingenuous to say it's between a woman and her doctor, because it's usually not her doctor that's having that discussion. Usually the gynecologist isn't even involved yet. It's just someone that works for Planned Parenthood. There's a great movie called Unplanned, and I would recommend that movie to anyone. It was about a person who was at the Houston office and worked her way up the ranks, became the director of that office, and eventually she realized what was going on, and she actually went public with it. and Planned Parenthood came at her full force, and she ended up winning. But it was a pretty good an inside view at what Planned Parenthood's all about. Their revenues were down, so they were coaching the people on how they gotta, we gotta double our revenues. Let's go. We gotta have more abortions.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the best way to help women.
I do know statistically, and it's proven that there have been more abortions since Roe v. Wade was overturned. But I think I'll leave that discussion. I've heard that, and I've read it actually.
Well, if I can, Roe v. Wade, overturn Roe v. Wade, I think is where it was the right decision from a constitutional standpoint.
Right.
Okay, so it's not the whole Roe v. Wade overturning isn't. Oh, wait, it was a great win against abortion. No, it was a great win for the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
We're a republic of states, and if it's not directly given to the federal government in the Constitution, it goes to the states, and that's what the overturning Roe v. Wade did, was push to the states. What I tell people is, so there's 330 million people in America. Your vote out of 330 million is pretty diluted. So what we try to do is we try to push it to the next level. Okay, now your vote out of 20 million in New York gives you a little more influence over your life. Mm-hmm. And if we can push it even lower to we'll say the county, now you are 1 in a million. Mm-hmm. So whenever we can push authority to the lowest level possible, that's what makes America great. Not handing it all up to a federal government, which eventually becomes China. So people don't get that because they look to the government to take care of everybody.
What about child care assistance? How do we help those moms that do have kids?
Okay, so my slogan, which I haven't talked about, is not left, not right, forward. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is where this comes into play. I am a Republican, so I'm not for child care assistance. But not left, not right, forward means we got to meet America where America's at. And to not recognize that we need help right now with that would be foolish. We need to have some kind of child care assistance. So fundamentally, I'm against it. But where we are right now, I'm for it. Now, if legislation came up that made sense, I'd be for that. Our birth rate is 1.6, and we need 2.1 to grow the country. Well, how do we fill that gap? We got to fill with immigrants, which we haven't talked about the border, but that's, I'm pro-immigrant. We just got to do it properly. But we should be looking at, okay, why are we at 1.6? Why are people not having kids? In part because it's culture's changed a little bit. But it's also because it's not affordable. So we got to figure out a way to help make it affordable so we can keep America growing and prosperous. So yeah, I would be for some kind of child care credit legislation.
In terms of immigration, your great-great-grandfather, I believe, came from Lithuania, and your great-great-grandmother from Italy. Is that true?
My mother's side is from Italy, going back. Yeah, you probably got a couple greats in there. Yep. And my dad's side was from Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, immigration, that's part of who we all are, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And as I said earlier, we do need immigrants. We just got to vet them properly. The open door policy is just, it doesn't make sense. I mean, a country ain't a country unless it has borders. And what they're doing, there are first of all, they open the border. And hopefully we can agree upon that. We got people swimming across the Rio Grande. That's not the way to do it. Donald Trump said, we're going to have a big, beautiful door for everyone to come through, which sounded silly, but I agree with him. Mm-hmm. We have a process where people can come through, but they shouldn't be swimming across the border, the Rio Grande. They shouldn't be coming up in droves. So HR 2 was legislation the House passed a year or 2 years ago. And my opponent voted against it. But what it did was it was reestablishing some of the policies that worked 4 years earlier. So we were going to, it continues a barrier. It continues with technology. It reinstituted Remain in Mexico. It abolished the catch and release program. Okay. Chuck Schumer in the Senate, the House passed it, Senate. Chuck Schumer wouldn't even take it up. Okay. So now, a year later, polling showing, even though they were telling us the border is secure as can be, polling showing America's not buying that lie. Mm-hmm. So now they got to do something. So now the Senate comes forth with their version of a bill, and all it did was codify the 5,000 coming across the border every day anyways. That didn't even include people coming through the CBP app, the Border Patrol app. Right. It didn't include children. Okay, so it was smoke and mirrors. The Senate passed it and went to the House. The House voted on it and declined it. Now they said it's because Donald Trump, made them do it. He wanted it to be an issue. No, it was a bad bill. And during my debate, I even said this. Donald Trump didn't call me and tell me it was a bad bill. I'm just smart enough to know it's a bad bill. Just do the math. Why should our goal be 5,000 illegals a day? Why is our goal not 0? So to me, the whole border, it's been despicable what's happening. So we are the complicit in growing the cartels because we made the cartels rich. We got crime coming across. We got the Venezuelan gangs coming across. Child trafficking, drugs, 100,000 deaths a year through fentanyl. I don't know if you saw, was it Martha Radich? Or it was one of I think it was Martha Radich. She was interviewing JD Vance. She said, well, it's only a couple apartments that have been taken over by the Venezuelan gangs. And his comment back to her was, do you hear yourself speak? It's just unbelievable. People are accepting this. And, Christopher Wray, the FBI director, said, it's not a matter of if something happens. It's a matter of when. We have let in so many criminals and so many terrorists. It's unbelievable. People can't see that. But the vitriol, the hatred for Trump, it's okay. Let him in.
Yeah, because when do you think people maybe recognize it, or is it when it's on your doorstep when they will?
You think
because you watch a video of the drone footage with these. Okay, I'll say it, they're poor families, like they're holding their kids above water and they're coming over. We know America has much better to offer, but there is also a lot of crime and criminals and drugs and everything. Are you surprised that people just don't see that, or how are they not knowledgeable that this is also occurring?
I'm going to go back to that Tytler cycle. We're at a point where we forget that this has all been built on people's, sweat equity, risk, hard work, and laws and principles. And we have a younger generation. It's like, well, geez, it's been perfect here forever. What do you mean? We got great stuff here. Let everybody in. Hey, you don't realize though, there's a balance. There's a balance to that. And I think that's, and they're good-hearted people. But I say it's good intentions with unintended consequences. People understand the ramifications. In addition to that, the ramifications from the countries they're leaving. So think about this. El Salvador, their young men are coming up here. There's a huge sucking sound out of El Salvador. Who's left to help their economy prosper? So the El Salvador president has made that an issue. Panama has made an issue about people coming through Panama and destroying, their environment. It's not good for anybody. Think about it. People have been child trafficked. Women have been raped. The Trail of Tears. We read about that in in history. This will have a different name to it when history looks back on it because it was dangerous and people lost their lives and people were abused. And again, the cartels have been made wealthy because of it. This is crazy.
How do you properly vet immigrants? Do you, because I know probably your grandparents came through Ellis Island, and there are also people that are in the country legally. There's people with green cards. Do you have a plan like that you could step behind and be like, this is what we got to do to vet?
Yeah. So first of all, first things first, our immigration system does have some parts that are working. Okay. We do allow legal immigrants in here every year. And I'm not sure what that number is, but it's 1 to 2 million a year. But it's the illegal ones we have got to stop. And the first thing we got to do is not have an open sign saying, come on up here. Okay. If we want the CBP app, instead of applying for asylum before you get here, how about you apply for asylum and the process works out while they're staying in their country, as opposed to this just being a free ticket to come into our country. Okay. You applied for asylum, stay there. We're going to work on it. The problem is we've let so many people in, we've flooded our system. And the system's always been a problem. But one of the things is, and this is just to me common sense. Let's talk about the dreamers. I don't know if you remember that issue from I think it was Obama's term. The Republicans don't want to just have blanket. The Republicans don't want to change the rules right now because they've let in so many people. So the Republicans want to let's plug the hole first. Let's stop the flood, and then we can talk about who's here. Whereas the Republicans want to keep that hole open while we talk about who's here. to me, logically, we got to plug the hole first. And then we can talk about, okay, who's going to stay? Who's going to go? Who's going to contribute to our economy? People, who's a terrorist? Get the freaking terrorists out of here. Get the criminals out of here. Those should be easy ones.
Mhm.
Go. A report came out 2 weeks ago. There's 435,000 criminals here from other countries. Now, there's an argument over what span of time period that is. But we know a lot have come in lately. I think it was 13,000 are murderers and 14,000 are sexual predators.
Mhm.
Why is that acceptable? So you asked about a plan. It's keep people in their remain in Mexico is phenomenal. That worked. And because people knew that they were going to be stopped at the Mexican border, they didn't even make the transit, from wherever they were coming from. Why are we flying people in from other countries, by the way, overseas? That's crazy.
Mhm.
But no one's talking about that.
No, and I think the circles of the information or sources that we get our information from, we're aware of it. And, when you do maybe get into a tough discussion with somebody, they almost look at you as if you're heartless and you don't have sympathy for another human being. And
Yet they're the ones that won't open their home and let someone just walk in for free.
I know and I got nothing to say on that, but it is true. And, you also have people that live, some of your higher end people that live maybe in a gated community versus, an apartment housing complex in Colorado where you have video of a Venezuela gang destroying, and then JD Vance has to have a debate about, oh, you're okay with just 5 police reports of this happening?
Just 5 buildings being taken over? That's
and,
acceptable?
And then if you try to put it on a more local scale, and, okay, what if it was Village 2, where we live here, and it was 5 buildings at Village 2? That would be extremely scary and frightening, and it would overtake the people that live there and the sheriff's office, and it would be very, very scary. And
in addition to that, there's a drain on other resources. So the lines at the medical centers are growing in those communities. So the taxpayers that have paid into the system are no longer able to take advantage of those services because there's other people that have come in and have jumped the line, and the government's paying for that. That just doesn't seem right. There's kind of a call this a paradox. Think about the Titanic, right? I don't know how many. Let's just say there are 3,000 people on it, but there are only enough boats for 1,000. What do? Do you put all 3,000 on those boats for 1,000, and you sink? And now no one. It's
doesn't make sense.
But it's a paradox. What do you do? I tend to be on the side of you got to do what makes sense. You can't lose everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Americans are here. We got to take care of our Americans. And if I also use the example I use is the airplane model, right? When they say when the oxygen mask drops, what do? You
take care of your first.
Take care of yourself first, then assist others. We are assisting others right now with the oxygen mask while Americans are starving of oxygen. Let's make sure Americans are strong and healthy, and it makes us more able to help other people. So that's something to keep in mind. Because we just send so much money overseas. We open up. We're good-hearted people. We're good-hearted people, but it's good intentions with unintended consequences.
Foreign policy. What's your ideas behind that?
Right now, it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you go back 4 years ago, we didn't have the wars we have. Peace through strength is. I mentioned Ronald Reagan earlier. Peace through strength, I think, is so important. You even go back as far as Teddy Roosevelt, right? Speak softly, but carry a big stick. It's always worked best when America's had that ability to do that. We've lost that ability, starting with that despicable departure from Afghanistan. I mean, think about the strategy here. First of all, it was done so that on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, we could say, hey, look what we did. So it was politically driven. But you pull the military out first, and then you take the civilians out. Who does that? And that's just unbelievable. We did that, and look how it harmed. We left billions in assets over there, billions of dollars in assets. People died. 13 of our service members died. Who knows how many of our allies in Afghanistan who were helping us died, and 20 years of work disappeared overnight. That's unbelievable. So I forget the direction of the question.
It was generally about foreign policy, and I guess has your military service affected your views on foreign policy?
I don't know if my military has affected my views, because I think I'd have them either way.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have an emotional tie. So let's say the Houthi rebels back in October, November, and December of last year, during the West Bank with the Gaza Strip crisis, when they're launching missiles at our ships to the tune of almost 200 during those 3 months, and this president allowed that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any other president would have. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Trump wouldn't have, obviously, but I'm pretty sure Obama wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Bush wouldn't have. I'm sure Clinton wouldn't have. We would have bombed the sites where those missiles were coming from, but yet we allowed that. What is it? So the Afghanistan issue, that issue, it just showed the world we are weak. Then you have what's going on in look at why we have the two wars, by the way. Okay, so Donald Trump made us energy independent, and he kept sanctions on Iran, the greatest sponsor of state terrorism in the world. He had sanctions on them and had them on their heels. Then the new administration comes in, and this administration has the assault on fossil fuels. So for a couple of years, we tapered down. We were not giving land leases. Where the oil producers are combing back their investment. So that allows Russia to now provide our allies with more oil. It allows Iran, which was pumping 300,000 barrels a day, to now start pumping 3 million barrels a day. Okay, so those two are getting rich, and now all of a sudden we have these wars. So they know America's, a paper tiger, and we help make them more wealthy, and now we have two wars. So to me, it all starts with policy. I firmly believe that if Donald Trump had been in office, none of those two wars would have started. And people will say that Trump's a puppet of Putin. I mean, let's talk logic here. So he goes into Crimea under Obama. Then when his puppet's in office, he doesn't go into Ukraine. And then when Biden's in office, he goes into the Donbass. That doesn't make logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's going on. So I do believe if Trump were in office, that wouldn't happen in both conflicts. So we need to have a strong presence. You asked about my military experience. So one thing that concerns me about the military is the military has gone woke. We shouldn't be talking about DEI in the military. We should be talking about how are we the best fighting force in the world. And frankly, DEI does not play into that. You wouldn't use DEI on your basketball team or your football team. You'd want the best players out there, regardless of sex, race, color, creed, gender. You want the best team out there. Mm-hmm. The military should be that, exponentially, the best people out there. But it's astounding the things I hear come out of the military with how that's not the mission. That's tragic. That's scary.
Now, you were also talking about fossil fuels, and what about environment? How does that play into all of that? Because, we're getting into a lot more presidential politics in this conversation, and he keeps talking about the liquid gold underneath our feet and drill, baby, drill. If you're an environmentalist, what does that sound like to you?
So I tend to put it in buckets. We can agree we have climate change, but let's look at why. Okay, we've lived through natural occurrences. Not we haven't lived through. The globe has been through natural occurrences, like the beautiful Finger Lakes were carved out by glaciers, ice that was down here 10,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there were carbon belch and factories that made that happen. There was something natural in the Earth's history that warmed the planet. So there is a natural component to it. There's also a human component. Remember Lake Ontario, we couldn't eat fish out of Lake Ontario, 30, 40 years ago mm-hmm. because of the pollution. And we had to clean that up because we caused that. So there's a little bit of each. Then there's those kind of, we'll say, unintended, I don't say unintended consequences, but things that tilt the statistics a little bit. So right now the hurricanes that come through Florida are devastating, right? But there's more people on the coastline exponentially now than there used to be. People have left the mainlands and have gone to the coastlines. So we've built up those coastlines more. So yeah, when a hurricane comes through, it's going to do a lot more damage because just more infrastructure there. The other aspect is the 24-hour news cycle. All we get hit with is, there's going to be a big one. There's going to be a big one. And a lot of times the big one doesn't happen. And it sometimes does happen. But in our memories, it's, man, everyone's a big one. Everyone's a big one. Well, 24 news cycle figures on that. So there are climatologists who say that it's happening. And there are those that say it's not. But the difference is the ones that get the government funding are the ones that are, supporting the narrative that it's happening. I wish I'd said this during my debate with Joe Morelli last week, but we have a very respected climatologist, meteorologist in the city here that's been on TV for 40 years here that people love and trust, Kevin Williams. And Kevin Williams is he's always on Joe Morelli's Twitter page saying, sir, you're lying. This is the facts. Mm-hmm. So you have people on both sides, just like most discussions, both sides of the equation. But that side gets the bigger amplification because there's money behind it. We've got to switch over the Green New Deal. We got to fund these initiatives. We got to the EV mandates. To me, it's kind of astounding. The other aspect of that is we can't even control our electric grid. Can't even control the switch over to electric that they're trying to push. So to me, we need to walk before we can run. So that's a big concern of mine. Also, if we're so much against fossil fuels, why are we not using nuclear? Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, nuclear subs have been around for over 70 years, okay, without incident. America's had great success with nuclear plants. And we know they're far more effective than, these huge wind farms or these huge solar farms, but we're not talking that. So to me, we got to separate the agenda from the reality. We got to separate the natural occurrences from the human occurrences. We just got to be honest about it. But that seems to be tough in Washington.
5 Mile Island might have been one of those nuclear plants that people are a little afraid of, right?
Yeah, was it 5 Mile?
3 Mile.
I think it was 3. I think it was 3 Mile.
No, but I have heard about nuclear that could help us out a little bit.
And Chernobyl was a disaster.
Exactly.
But that was Russia has different protocols than we do. And with 3 Mile, I think it's 3 Mile Island. It's either 3 Mile or 9 Mile. That we weathered that. We learned a lot from it, and I'm not aware of the ramifications beyond just being a big scare.
Keep talking. Checking my sound system.
Checking your sound system.
You're interested about the 24-hour news cycle. I have a brother that lives down in North Carolina, and they went through that hurricane in Asheville, North Carolina, and so it was heavily hit. But then it's almost, I'm up here, and I have to consciously think from day to day to check in on them because, the news, they're gonna move on to something the next day.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want my comments to be construed as we don't have those issues.
No, I wasn't. But okay. I think everything rapidly is going so rapid now with social media and phones, and it's just that it's like, well,
on to the next.
There was that train derailment in Ohio a year and a half ago. Like, what about that town? Did that town ever recover? How are those people doing? And it's.
Yeah, we always get the front page when the story's new, but it's always on page 8 that no one gets to hear what happened. Mm-hmm. And that's just like what I was saying earlier. When the politicians come in and give these big checks, woohoo, front page, and then when they fail, it's on page 8. No one's seeing it.
Going back to your family, you had a father that was pipe fitter at Kodak, and then your mom. I like how you described her. She was a household CEO. Talk about them a little bit.
So I was, we talk about, you hear the phrase white privilege. Mm-hmm. I like to say that I was parent privileged. Mm-hmm. I had 2 amazing parents. My father came from a very poor family, alcoholic family. And he went in the Navy when he was young, I think 18, 19. But he met my mother. They were high school sweethearts. She came from a strong Italian family, and she turned him. She made him an honorable guy. Not that his brother and sister weren't honorable, but they struggled for 20, 30, 40 years until they found their place in life. Mm-hmm. My mother was able to help my dad at a young age. He's just an honest, good guy, good character. One thing he did that we couldn't get away with today is he took a belt to our butt.
Mhm.
If we did something wrong, we felt the wrath. And I'd say over the course of my childhood, the memory wants to exaggerate. It was probably maybe, I don't know, 10 times I took a belt to my butt, but it kept us in line. I'm thankful he'd be hauled off today.
Mhm.
If that happened, but I'm so thankful he did that. It kept us, we had 4 boys. They had 4 boys, and it kept us straight on the straight and narrow. My mother, she was phenomenal. She was a pretty special person. Talk about a tragic life though. So my dad passed away when I was 19 in 1986. My mother had her stroke 8 months later, which left her paralyzed. She never had use of her left arm after that, and her left leg was about 70%. And you talk about people with a bad lot in life. She remained positive. She couldn't exercise, but yet she counted every calorie. She counted, and she just, she was just pretty special.
What'd your dad pass away from?
He had a stroke also.
Okay.
Yep.
Any concerns that it follows family genetic path?
Well, it's funny because not funny, but at 40 to 42, first Steve made it over that hurdle.
Right.
Okay, who's next? Tim made it over that hurdle. Then I made it over that hurdle, and then Rick made it over. And now we're well past 42. So, and we get various tests, periodically to watch it. But there was we've made it over that hurdle.
I did read also that, I don't know if it was you or it was all the boys had different jobs at the Irondequoit, delivering the Irondequoit shopper, working at Green Acres Farms, Democrat and Pownell delivery boys. Was that you or all of you 4 boys at one time?
Those were all me, but
Mhm.
we at various points we all had that. It taught us responsibility.
Mhm.
I mean, so in college, I actually I was the richest kid in college, not because I inherited money, because I had 3 jobs. I was getting a paycheck from Flower City Printing, where I worked. I was getting a paycheck from coaching, and I was getting a paycheck from ROTC, and I was taking 19 credit hours. So I mean, we were always working. My friends were afraid to come over to my house because they'd be afraid my mother would put them to work. Not lying, but it was great. The paper route was the best though. That taught you customer service. I had to go collecting money. I had to make sure I'd be out in Hilton at a party, till 2 a.m, and I had my little Honda 175 motorcycle that I'd have to get up at 5 o'clock after 2 o'clock party ended, ride my motorcycle home, and deliver the weekend papers. It was Mom made sure we knew responsibility.
Just going to take a quick break for a second. Okay, hopefully this is part 2 and the last part of our little podcast here. So you returned from deployment and you ended up taking care of Mom, and it was quite a long time, for about 35 years.
Yeah, she passed away right before COVID.
Okay.
Which was actually kind of nice. I would have hated to see her, after having such a hard life, die during COVID,
Mhm.
and she could only have one person by her side. So she died the December the COVID fired up, and she was able to have the whole family there. But it was about 35 years. But yeah, I came home in 92 it was, and to help out. And to be frank with you, the one that helped out the most is my brother Tim. Tim was a saint to my mother. Tim was pretty special to her. And because Tim did all he did for her, it allowed the other 3 of us to do what we're able to do. And so Tim now works in my collision shop. So after so many years of helping her, he's helping me at this collision shop now.
Now you talked about, I think when you did a lot with Rick and you were at parent conferences and you got to follow him along with, wrestling. Talk a little bit about those experiences.
Yeah, so that all happened Rick's sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I mentioned that's when I was coaching, so I was always in the school at that point. And my mother had the stroke, and since Rick wasn't the best book student as it was to begin with, and then when this happens, now he's got other issues and he doesn't have his parents. So, because he's, Mr. Evans, the science teacher, I had Mr. Evans 2 years earlier, and now I'm having parent-teacher conferences with Mr. Evans. And the school is phenomenal. I mean, they understood what was going on. but it was tough. Rick got the brunt of it, not having his parents at such a young age. And
then
financially, by the way, that was another thing. I mean, I had to run the household books, so the family was cut in half that year. My oldest brother, Steve, goes off to the service. A couple weeks later, my dad dies. And then 8 months later, my mom has her stroke. So now it's, the top of the chain of the command is all gone. And it's, Tim, Rick, and I that are left to keep everything afloat.
what type of family values have aided you in your political pursuit?
So what type of family, you hear my voice, the passion and the love I have for my parents and even my brothers who, we're all different. Each one of them's got a special, unique quality, and they're different than me, but they all have a special place in the family, and that carries on to my boys. My boys, we have a great relationship. I have the business with Zach. I have, Jake and I got a great relationship, and I didn't mention this, but during COVID, we needed something to do, so my oldest son picked up hockey, and a year later he pulls me into it, and then he pulls his younger brother into it. And now I'm playing with his friends against their friends, with them against them. That's been phenomenal. It was a great family experience. But I think I don't know if it has any direct impact on my campaign, but it makes me understand the value of families. What it does do is when I go and, campaigning is taking me on places that we wouldn't normally go. And I see what's going on in the city, and it's unbelievable. Let me share one night with you. I was asked to serve popcorn at the Willie Lightfoot Center.
Mm-hmm.
And I go there, and I'm as white as a white guy can be. I'm wearing my khaki pants, my white polo, and I'm serving popcorn there. And these kids are great. They're K through 6, great kids. But as I get out of the vehicle, it's like, man, I look pretty different here.
Mm-hmm.
And I get in there. It's a great experience. And then my host goes, hey, do you want to come out to a bar with us afterwards? I'm like, yeah, where are we going? She's like, Jefferson Avenue. It's like, okay, let's go. Doing my campaign research.
Right.
And I met some great people there. And then she goes, hey, we're going to go to a porch party at my house. You want to come? And that's on Champlain Street. So I'm in deep. And I'm there till like 1 a.m. And I have this one guy, he's 20-year-old black guy who's drunk and high. And he's crying on my shoulder. He's like, Greg, you wonder why we steal. Look at this shit we got to live in. Mm-hmm. There's a fight going on the street. He's like, look up there. Look what's going on. And you wonder why we kill. We have, we've lost all hope. And I think that's tragic. So we talk about family values. I think that a lot of the policies that the black community's lived under has taken away, they've made them single mothers. As fathers have been incarcerated, and we haven't provided hope for them. So it hasn't made me more of a liberal politician, I'll say. It's made me more of an empathetic one. It's okay, how do we fix that? We got to get back to the family. Now, unfortunately, they vote for the politicians that have enacted all this garbage. The soft on crime. Soft on crime was meant to help the black community that gets incarcerated because they're being treated differently, which, okay, that's great. We need to be careful about that. We also can't let the people that are most affected by the crimes keep having more crimes. And that's what's happening in the city. And to me, it's horrible. Education. We're not helping these kids with education in the city. I'm sure you probably know the stats of the city schools. Mm-hmm. It's pretty unbelievable. I went to a Virtus. Are you familiar with Virtus Charter School? Okay. I went to Virtus Charter School, and I get there as the buses are unloading, and it's 100 black boys per class. And there's kids out front with signs like cheerleaders, welcome to school. It's going to be a great day. It was like, well, that's pretty cool.
Right.
And then I get inside, and the seniors and juniors go to their place, and I'm with the freshmen and sophomores in the cafeteria to start their day. They start a slide presentation. They read the creed, the school motto. The kids were so polite. And then the teacher goes, oh, by the way, in the back is a prospective congressman. You guys make sure you say hi to him today. It was like such an engaging experience. We got to help these kids. We got to help keep families together and help these kids have an opportunity to have their own families and be successful. But that was another watershed moment for me.
I'm glad you did it, because sometimes you don't understand the strife and the issue unless you're involved in it. and going to a campaign stop, porch party, to that gentleman crying on your shoulder, you would have never really gotten the true measure of the
Yeah.
problem.
I've gone to a lot of black barbershops in the city
Mhm.
during campaigning. And, the one I went to right before my debate, I actually went back to the same one because we didn't have time. Usually we film it, but this one I needed to get a haircut quickly. And so we didn't set that up. And I go in there without my campaign manager, who's Latino. And I'm literally on Avenue D and Clinton Avenue. And, they were so welcoming to me. I'd been there like 2 months earlier. They're so welcoming to me and they're all excited. But the first time I was there, just hearing how they lived, this guy's had this barbershop for 17 years. He's like, right now, though, I come in at 8 o'clock, I stay here, at 5 o'clock, I leave. I'm gone. And he's Latino. I mean, it's unbelievable the circumstances these people are living under.
Mhm.
And it's all policy driven.
Well, maybe you'll have a chance to make some wholesale changes. Do you wrestled with Doug Lemke? Is that correct?
Yes, Doug and Mike O'Shea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about their tragic endings.
They're both great guys.
Mhm.
It was funny because we talk about not left, not right, forward. Different people coming together. Doug and Mike were necessarily, if we weren't wrestlers, we may not have been, our circles may not have crossed. But Doug, they're both great guys. Mike's family was a wonderful family.
There was a lot of them, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a lot of them. I think Mike was in the middle somewhere. And Doug actually married one of the sisters.
Yep.
Yeah. But they were, that is tragic at such a young age. We've lost a lot of people. Todd Everts, I don't know if you know Todd.
Mhm.
Todd was part of the personality of our class. But yeah, Mike and Doug were too young.
Now I got your old yearbook out, 1984, because of course I was a freshman that year. Do you remember what the favorite song is, just to lighten this podcast up before we end?
The favorite song, I'm going to say maybe it had something to do with Every Breath You Take, maybe from.
It was actually, think of
I say Come On Eileen
the
was
King
my
of
favorite.
Pop. Think of the King of Pop.
Okay, it wasn't Thriller. Wouldn't have been Billie Jean.
It was Beat It.
Beat It. Okay.
Now, of course, the album, which kids of today have no idea what an album is. That would have been Thriller by Michael Jackson. Saying 3 words. It's not Figure It Out or Do It. Do It Up.
I wouldn't have got that one.
Okay. This one you might get just because you're a military guy. What was your favorite movie of your graduating class?
Could have been Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
No. Military. An Officer and a Gentleman with, Richard Gere and I don't know I forgot the female lead.
Yeah.
Barbara Hershey? No, I don't think so. Favorite place to hang out? Do you remember where that was?
The mall.
Close. Putt-putt.
Okay.
Yeah. And then quick question before I let you have your final pitch. What would your social media app be today if you invented one? What would you name it? What would it do?
I'm still happy with MySpace. No, I frankly don't I wish we didn't have social media apps.
Well, then make a comment on social media. What I mean is, your opinion of it. Like, what has it done to kids? You know what I mean?
I think it's polarized people.
Yeah.
I do. Okay, because I'm a politician now, so I'm out there with my views, and I get what I call keyboard cowards, which aren't even from my district, which will be attacking me. It's like, first of all, put your name out there, put your picture out there, put your background out there. Unless you do that, you're a freaking coward. And I deal with a lot of them.
I remember when I started following politics probably during the Clinton years, and one of the hosts on MSNBC said, "Man, you have no idea what it is being a politician, putting your name out there, it's tough, like we can sit there and criticize and everything, but until you put your name on a ballot, you have no idea what that candidate and their family goes through."
So I was at the Brighton debate with Joe Morelli. And as the kids are filing in, him and I are actually together talking. We're trying to be light and have the kids see us smile. And that was the actual topic I was talking about. I said, yeah, I don't agree with everything you say, but it really bothers me when I see people attack you for stuff that's just inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I were kind of joking about some of the stuff that we see out there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really bad. It's inappropriate and it's cowardly. It's cowardly.
Do you think we'll ever get back to civility, or I mean, in presidential politics, it's been really serious, so much to where we know what happened in July.
We got to get past the Trump era.
Mm-hmm.
Until we're past that, and I think he's the best candidate to be leading the country right now. But the other side will not let that go. I mean, the fact that they call him a fascist is despicable.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an insult to those that were under fascism in Nazi Germany. That you really don't understand what fascism was if you're calling that guy the fascist. And I think I told you before we were on camera. What's a fascist do? They consolidate their power, right? And during COVID, that was a national emergency that fascists would use to consolidate their power. He did the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
He pushed power to the governors. Let's lay off the rhetoric and let's talk policies. Can I read to you
Yeah, take your time.
an email I got today, which I thought was pretty fascinating? Because to me, it's about policy. It's not about personality. It's not about party. So this came through my website today. This woman says, I heard you on Evan Dawson's Connections. You sound like a good and reasonable guy, and I appreciate your temperament and the approach you appear to take towards politics. I was really curious about your Congressman for a Day quiz, which I encourage you to go to my website, sadwickforcongress.com, and take the Congressman Challenge for a day. It's 10 questions that actual piece of legislation that you vote on, and you compare it to me or Morelli. Then you should vote.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay. So I talked about on the radio show, your Congressman for a Day quiz. So I took it. I appreciate that you said voters should vote not on the basis of political parties and should instead vote for the politician whose votes align with your views. The quiz said I should vote for Morelli, which honestly doesn't surprise me. However, I think it shows real confidence and transparency on your part to put such a useful tool on your website and honestly advise voters on which politicians align more closely with their views. Kudos. And that's what my campaign's been about. It's not about the person. It's not about the party. It's about the policies. And if you are more aligned with him, then you should vote for him. That's democracy. If you're more aligned for me, you should reconsider voting for him and vote for me. But I got that this morning. Even though she's not going to be a voter of mine, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, you already answered my next question. Final pitch to voters, and I like your little quiz. Do you have a different set of 10 questions every day, or is it the same 10?
It's the same 10.
Okay.
Yeah. Even Lonsberry picked it up, and he was talking about it last week. I was like, great, appreciate the publicity.
All right, so just some fun favorites. What's your favorite food?
I used to like spaghetti because it was easy to make, but now those damn air fryers.
Yeah,
steak is so darn simple,
I know.
It's incredible how the air fryers make steak. So that's now number one.
Favorite restaurant?
Restaurant. I got to give a big shout out to Venitos down on East Avenue because they've been so good to me in my campaign. But that's a great restaurant to go to. I should also say Capitano's. It's the old Brody's on Aranaquay Bay because I can walk across the parking lot to it.
Okay.
So that's a great place to go for.
Where's your election headquarters?
It's in my office. So my office is about the size of this room. So we're able to have I have my team there, and we operate right out of there because it allows me to be in my business all day too if someone needs me.
How many members of your campaign team do you have?
I have six payroll employees.
Okay.
And then there's various other people that are helping out.
Okay. How about a favorite quote?
Boy, I'm trying to think of this Yogi Berra one that I was just using on
90% of putts that fall short don't go in.
No, the future ain't what it used to be. So vote differently.
Pretty good related to politics. Favorite book? Were you much of a reader?
I've read a lot of Tom Clancy when I was younger, but now I've been reading a lot of the Bill O'Reilly books, the killing books.
The Killing series.
Yeah, so Killing Reagan was awesome. Killing Jesus was awesome. I read the Killing Patton and Killing the Rising Sun at the same time. But the one I have right now that I got right before the campaign started was Killing The Mob. So that's the next one we're reading.
Good. Do you have a favorite binge show that you watch?
I miss the simple shows. So right now I'm into the reruns of Everyone Loves Raymond because that's what's on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have to think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about what was on the prior show. I can just watch it for what it is, and that's what it is. I do like Yellowstone.
Okay.
And
I've heard good things.
The Star Trek series
Really?
is phenomenal. Oh my
You're
God.
a Trekkie?
I would have thought I was a Star Wars guy, but the new series of Star Wars, Star Trek, are phenomenal. All of them. The best one I think was Picard because it actually tied in a lot of the stuff from the Next Generation, pulled it forward. But I would encourage anyone to watch those Star Trek series.
Interesting. If you get dinner with, I might already know the answer to this, dinner with a person from history, who would it be and why?
Well, I'd want to meet Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be at the top of the list,
Mm-hmm.
but probably Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
He was.
That's the one I thought you were going to go to,
yeah,
but
I
I'm
figured.
impressed with Jesus. It's good. Well, how many days do you have left? I mean, I'm going to throw this up today. So how many left before?
I think we got
November?
9. Early
9
voting.
days?
Early voting started yesterday.
Okay.
So it's underway. It's happening.
What's left? What's next on in the closing week? What do you plan on doing? What appearances and whatnot?
I've been contacted by a lot of TV stations. So I got a couple snippets on TV stations coming up. Man, my calendar. What's on my calendar for tomorrow?
We got a mailer coming out, right? To 50,000 people, you said?
That hit like Friday, but I have another mailer coming out next week.
Okay.
And it's 2 new commercials.
Okay.
2 new commercials. I'm a little disappointed that one of my social media posts didn't get as many hits as I would hope. I gotta find out why not. But last week, because I jumped out of an airplane saying, "Take a leap of faith with Sadwick for Congress." That was pretty incredible.
That is. I didn't see it, but
Yeah, I got to talk to my
that's creative. Did you come up with the idea or?
Yeah.
That is pretty cool.
That was awesome. Free falling for 45 seconds. And then when the chute gets pulled and just seeing everything up, we could see Niagara Falls, Toronto, and Buffalo. That was pretty amazing.
Nice. Good for you. Taking a risk of life. We want to take a risk in the political field too.
Yeah. And the 2 girls on my team would do it, but 2 of the guys wouldn't. I don't know what the deal was there, but 2 girls did it.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Well, Gregg, with 3 G's, good luck in your campaign. I really appreciate you for joining me on the Big H podcast.
Thanks, Mike.
Please follow me on X at Michael Heiss 17, all capital letters with Josh Allen's football number, on YouTube at the Big H podcast, and on Rumble and Spotify. Gregg, good luck. Thank you for tuning in. Some of our upcoming guests include teacher Katie Caprino and Terry Gilmore, Tim Ann, and more.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
The Big H podcast, tune in now. Conversations that'll wow. Laugh and learn, stay a while. Let's explore that Hilton style. From the highs to the lows, every story just explodes. Mike's got questions on the go, diving deep from head to toe. Every week the guests align, sharing moments so divine. Stay with us, the pace is fine. Every episode you'll find